Good morning, friends. And good morning to all those who are watching us online live or who will watch us in the future. We hope we didn't mess things up more for you. Lately, I've been getting sick of bad news. More accurately, I've been getting sick from bad news. I don't mean figuratively or metaphorically sick either. I mean, it's been making me physically ill, showing up in ever-present headaches, a permanently clenched jaw, an enduring knot in the pit of my stomach, and a continual fight or flight body cortisol tsunami. Now, you're well-adjusted people, so you haven't been experiencing any of those things. On many days, I wake up in the morning, and at first, I forget the angry, bitter, terrible things happening. And I feel quite fine. It's as if a few hours respite reset me. The sun hits my face, and for a tiny sliver of time with my head still on the pillow, I feel all the emotions one should feel upon the arrival of a new day. I feel hope and joy and optimism and gratitude. I inhale slowly and deeply for a second, because then I wake up, I check my phone, and I see what's trending, and all the alarms go off. I see people leveraging fear, manufacturing crises, perpetuating hatred and trafficking in prejudice. And the massive wave of all that malice washes over me, and I find myself internally sinking in this flood of fear and anger before my feet even touch the floor. I imagine if you're here today, you understand some of these symptoms of what I call information sickness. Anybody afflicted here? So this last week was a bad week, a bad news week. Everywhere I turned, I was thinking, could somebody just give me some good news? Then I realized I'd fallen into a trap of doing something that I've spent years telling people not to do. We've often talked here about the idea of knowing what things are in our power to affect, so that instead of looking at the injustice and the ugliness of the world and trying to make sense of nonsensical things, instead of just asking why and lamenting, we've talked about asking what now, so that we can move into the fruit of the serenity prayer of differentiating what is within our power to affect and what is not, so that we lean into the former and we ask the question, what of this is up to me? What of all of this is mine to carry? Because you are not responsible to carry it all. This week, I realized I'd been negatively editorializing all the information in front of me, deciding whether it was bad or good, usually deciding that it's bad, and letting that decision shape the story I told myself, and then everything that followed from it. And maybe you've been guilty of that too, of putting a negative slant on the headlines in your head. Because we are a people who live always inside a story. And guess what? We are the narrators of that story. The world moves, and people do things, and events take place, and we decide what that all means and the implications. And then our emotions and our perspectives flow from them. Now, long ago, maybe you're like me, I stopped watching network news because I began to realize that I wasn't being given the news. I was being given the most alarming, most terrifying, most violent segments of the news. I was being fed those things most likely to elicit rage and fear and urgency. And I likely had those before I even turned the news on. Over the past couple of decades, as social media has overtaken legacy media, newspapers and local newscasts have had to resort to ever more sensational stories and incendiary delivery to try and keep the attention of people who are conditioned to the relentless bombast and look over here volume that the internet specializes in. So no area of the TV news is unscathed, not even the weather. We used to have a weather forecast. Now we have the Severe Weather Center. And the threats are highlighted: floods, wildfires, blizzards, and not because they want to educate us on climate change or keep us safer, but because, like so many other areas of our lives, the negative is now lucrative. Pessimism is currency. As I mentioned, social media itself, where I run every morning as if that's a better alternative, has changed the landscape of information and how we receive the news. It hits us with a relentless barrage of doom and destruction and outrage fuel, where the worst stuff generates the most clicks. Even those people and accounts online genuinely seeking to keep us informed and engaged end up demoralizing us. I certainly fall into this category sometimes. I've often said that on many days, I wouldn't want to read what I've written. Not because it isn't true, but because we're all exhausted from how much truth we know. It's funny, Sue, I was watching this a couple weeks ago. Sue shared the experience of, I think, being at the grocery store or somewhere, looking around and everyone seemingly carrying on with life as usual and wanting to scream, "The world is on effing fire, people!" And I felt seen. I get that because I do that, I say that, and actually, I write that down and publish it. I've shared with you the reality that being a person who tries to comment on the events of the day, I know I can be in danger of becoming a demotivational speaker. And the truth is, most people know the world is on fire, and they're not trying to avoid it as much as they're trying to stay human and keep living in the face of something so massive, so incomprehensible, so potentially soul-crushing, and that's what we do every day. So most people aren't ignoring what's happening, they're trying to live alongside things that are almost impossible to live alongside. You ever see that Saturday Night Live skit, the Debbie Downer skit? You know, Debbie's there and she's always with a group of people, and no matter what the topic is, she can always bring it down to the morose, and then everything is just wah, wah, and I feel that in myself often. I was at a volunteer gathering with a bunch of activists and thinking, what do I have to share that they don't already know that's actually good news? And if you watch the news or you read newspapers or you use social media, you know that the people giving you that information want you to be excited and have a strong reaction so that you will want to watch or read more, in the same way that you can't look away from a car crash. From political stories to health news, to crime reports, to the weather, the editors tell you the story that brings the greatest response, the most adrenaline-producing response. They want you in a state of crisis because then you're easily manipulated. But what's interesting, friends, is that the worst of politics and the worst of religion do the same thing. Get people scared, and you'll be able to steer them by telling them you will fix whatever they are terrified by, or in the case of those they oppose, they work to dishearten them by hitting them with a relentless barrage of bad news. So I want to know today, I want you to think about this. What are the headlines in your head? Is hopelessness trending there? Because I think that's largely been the story for most of us over the past 15 months, maybe the last decade. Feeling like the bad news is unending. And to some degree, it's been true, right? Objectively, it's been true. But we have also perhaps allowed ourselves to believe the mythology of our timelines and our internal editors. and our worst case scenario minds. Because the information that we have at our fingertips now is a blessing. It's beautiful. We can know things that are happening quickly and all the time. We have almost no limits on what we have access to, but there's a downside to this, that we are continually inundated with more information than we can accurately process or interpret or emotionally carry. And instead of having the wisdom to slow down and recalibrate and put it aside for a little bit, we move faster. We often slot machine refresh our phones in search of relief, and we find more emotional accelerant. And so in the velocity at which we are living, and the toll on us that the speed and influx of information takes, the toll that takes on our nervous systems, we begin to make snap judgments about what is flying by. Is it good or is it bad? Is it part of the spiral up or spiral down? Is it confirmation of our greatest fears, or are there promising signs? And the things we often see as bad news begin to snowball, and the headlines are horrible, and what is trending in our heads is not hope at all. Now, in thinking about today and my time with you, I thought of a piece of Christian scripture from my old youth pastor days. Now, for many in this room who grew up in the Christian tradition, we've recontextualized the Bible, and for me, many passages no longer resonate in the same way they once did, but there are still ideas and phrases that can be meaningful simply as concepts. And I wanted to share with you in the New Testament, in the book of Romans, which is purportedly known to be a letter written by Paul to the Jesus followers in home churches in Rome during the first century. And the writer is encouraging his listeners, because the letter would have been read aloud like this. He's encouraging them to remember how important their presence and their work were regarding the spreading of the gospel, right? And the gospel actually means good news. So he was telling them what was their responsibility to carry. And he closes this portion of the letter by quoting an Old Testament prophet. And he says this: "How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." Do you have beautiful feet right now? Because regardless of our theology or our religious worldview, what a wonderful idea this is. A reminder to all of us to think about the news that our feet bring to the places we travel every day. The people we cross paths with. The stuff we post on social media. Take away the trending stories, the alarming news, the disturbing realities, and we are still sentient human beings who have choices to make about how we spend our time and our resources and our energy. We still have freedom and decisions and options in front of us today. So today's message is really a letter to the editor, you. Because the truth is, no one gets to decide what is good or bad news, at least what is only bad news. Because with the countless things that happen every day, we ultimately get to respond. We also need to remember that when we are telling ourselves a story of everything is awful, hope is lost, we are screwed, we're doing a terrible injustice to the tens of millions of people who at any given moment right now are working to craft a more compassionate place. People who are doing small acts of microactivism, people who are standing up to bullies and opposing legislation and finding and using their voices and showing up in the places of pain and injustice and need. They are bringing good news. And when we say we are hopeless, we are discounting everything that they're doing. Last weekend, I was invited to speak at a church in a small blue dot in a massive Red Sea in Iowa. And in the days leading to my departure, I was having a severe fight-or-flight moment, thinking, what's the point? I'm tired of saying the same thing. It's not going to make a difference. But I went, and I'm so grateful that I went. Because during those 4 days, I met hundreds of ordinary human beings like you and me, who are still on duty, still organizing, still ministering, still creating. And that reminded me that my hopelessness would be an insult to all of these people. How dare I say it's hopeless when they exist? And billions of people across the planet do as well. See, we can easily begin believing the angry, fearful people are the majority. That their hateful hearts are humanity's default. That all is most surely lost, and that all the news is breaking badly. If you feel that way, stop it. Because it's a lie. Good people still inhabit this place, and we need to see them. And not just see them, we need to dwell on the good people. Fixate on them, allow our minds to linger on their goodness and obsess on their kindness and be taken aback at their unthinkable capacity for beauty. Because the good news bringers that are everywhere, showing compassion to strangers, doing small unseen acts of decency, toiling humbly in anonymity, living generously toward people, loving counterintuitively. There is, right now, glorious, heartwarming, defiantly human work being done all around you in this very moment. And you could get yourself to see it. And if you could, hope would be involuntary. So don't let the heaviness of absorbing only the sorrow and suffering squeeze out the possibility from you. Seek out something that will lighten you. Shift your gaze from the loud, attention-stealing headlines for a minute and look around you. Where specifically do you see equality and diversity and compassion and love winning? Who do you see being the kind of person the world needs right now? What or who gives you reason to believe that better days are still on the horizon? The world needs to know these things. Think about somebody right now. Someone you know, someone in your community, someone you've seen from a distance, a person, an organization, an event that made you say, goodness is still here. Maybe even someone in this room. In 1871, Unitarian minister Theodore Parker spoke the words, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And these words have been spoken by us many times. They've been spoken all over the world as solace in times of adversity. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it leans toward justice. Sometimes these words have been spoken as a coping mechanism against despair. They're words we say as declaration, this is true, or as aspiration, it one day could be true. But in days like these, we need to repeat these words again, not as solace for weary spectators, but as a mission statement for those of us who are here and want to see something better than we currently see. This is the entire point of you living and breathing and being awake and alive to hear these words right now. To be an arc bender. To see all the information in front of you and decide to craft a better story. That's always been the work of good human beings. We can't avoid the bad news. We can't fast forward through the difficult things. We can't sidestep the painful and get around the suffering and the sadness in this life. What we can do is respond in such a way that we bring something with us into our daily journeys. We can bring kindness and courage and creativity and consistency. As I said, the word gospel means good news. So without even needing to attach it to religion, there is a gospel, good news according to you. You have a gospel that no one else has seen and no one else can declare. What are you evangelizing? We can be modern day prophets. We can deliver a message, predict the future, see something on the horizon and tell people to prepare for that. It can be doom or gloom, but it can also be hopeless. It can be something that might still be possible if we refuse to consent to the bad news as the last word. So yes, we need to be the good news bringers. You carried these beautiful things in here with you, and you need to carry something beautiful out of here. So he said, more than merely seeing the good news bringers, we need to be them, to be fueled by all that burdens and grieves and encourages and inspires us, and spend ourselves on behalf of something better. We don't need to wait for someone to save us or fix things or show up and twist the plot, because that is why we are here. We can make beauty go viral when ugly things tend to steal the bandwidth. Now, I'm not going to deny the suffering or sidestep the very real dangers or pretend many things aren't in many ways quite awful. But I want you to allow a dissenting opinion in because it deserves to be heard. I want you to have a passionate rebuttal to the prophets of doom who forecast an irreversible course into the abyss. We need to amplify love today so that we don't forget how present and active it still is. The world needs some good news, so give it some. Be good news bringers, because how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. May you have beautiful feet this week, friends.